Welcome back to the European Parliament in Brussels for the second part of Talking Europe. My guest today is Guy Verhofstadt, the outspoken leader of the group of Liberals and Democrats in the European Parliament. A former Belgian Prime Minister is calling for the creation of a truly federal Europe, complete with a new constitution. Mr. Verhofstadt, welcome to our program. You've recently published a book called For Europe, a manifesto for a post-national revolution in Europe. This is co-authored with Daniel Cohn-Bendit, the leader of the Greens. Yeah. How can you sell the idea of a federation, a sort of European state, to the European public when they are more and more wary of Europe? A lot of them blame Europe for the current woes.
Well, that's a mistake. It's not very fair to say that the current crisis is a crisis of Europe. It's a crisis of the nation states who are not capable to overcome the financial crisis, who are not capable alone to have a common currency. It's obvious that you can have only a single currency if you have also a political union, an economic union, and a fiscal union. And those people who are criticizing that, I'm always saying, but look to the United States. They were also a loose confederation of independent nation states in the 18th century, and they became a superpower by working together, by creating a federal American authority. Why not to do the same thing? Because the world of tomorrow is very clear. The world of tomorrow is dominated by China, by India, by the US, by empires, and no one single nation state in Europe is capable to be the counterpart of these new empires.
In your book you say that in 20 years not a single European country will even be part of the G8.
It's obvious that the only way to maintain our sovereignty in this globalized world, to protect our sovereignty, our social model, our market, internal market, is by doing it together in a federal Europe.
You are calling for a post-national revolution in Europe, using the word revolution. How optimistic are you that your message will be heard by the likes of Angela Merkel, François Hollande?
Well, it's clear that they don't like that idea. Why they don't like that idea? Because it's a loss of power for them and a gain of power for Europe. It's a transfer of competences and power from the national level to the European level. There is the problem. But I'm optimistic. Why? Because there is the ongoing euro crisis. So we started with a single currency, and it's obvious that a single currency is only possible, sustainable, if we do also all the other steps. And the other steps are next to a monetary union, an economic union, a fiscal union, and a political union. And it is very clear that if we don't do that, the euro is not sustainable. I know it's maybe difficult to say that for the moment, because in the beginning of this year, well, you could say that the financial markets have calmed down. That is certainly the consequence of the operation launched by Mr. Draghi of the European Central Bank, this OMT operation, the possibility for the ECB to buy bonds of countries in difficulties. But it's clear that that hasn't solved the problem.
In the long term.
In the long term. And to do that, you need this new jump into the direction of a European federation.
Now, David Cameron has made it clear he wants to renegotiate the current relationship with Europe. He wants a new deal with Europe, which means potentially repatriating prerogatives to London. What's your take on this?
I think it's a bad thing for Europe, but certainly, moreover, it's a bad thing for Britain and for the British citizens and certainly the British economy. And why I'm saying that? Because what Mr. Cameron is looking for is a type of second-class membership of the European Union. And we have some examples of that. We have Norway, Switzerland, or typical countries who are not a member of the European Union, but nevertheless they apply the European rules. So they apply the European rules, they pay for it, but they have no say in it. And I think it's a bad thing for Britain. First of all, it's a loss of influence on the continent. And that is for the first time then, since the wars against Napoleon, I should say, that Britain is giving up influence on the continent. And secondly, it's a bad thing for the British economy, because 50% of the exports of Britain are going to the continent. are going to the other countries of the European Union. And 80% of all activities in the city are done in euro. So I think it's a very bad, maybe it's interesting naturally to gain some votes in a number of villages in Britain. But when you look, it's not for nothing that a number of leaders, economic leaders, came out a few days ago in the FT, in the Financial Times.
They wrote a letter warning Cameron against
exactly, and then there was after that, the day after that, an editorial in the FT indicating that it is a bad choice what Mr. Cameron is doing.
How do you explain that Euroscepticism is so entrenched in British society?
Well, because they don't have any other vision on the future of.
So the media is responsible.
Well, I'm not saying the media are responsible, but there are no politicians, except maybe Nick Clegg, who are in fact giving another vision, another future for Europe. There is no Winston Churchill for the moment in the United Kingdom. You know, Winston Churchill was the first political leader in Europe after the Second World War who was proposing a United States of Europe. And he was saying we need to do that. And that is what we lack for the moment, British politicians with the vision of Winston Churchill.
What about the French? How do you rate President Hollande? Is he a true European? Does he really want to further integrate?
I think he's a true European. But as every other head of state or head of government, there is a fear that they shall lose power, that they shall lose influence inside the European Union. And that's a big mistake, because as I already indicated in the World of Tomorrow, it's only on the European level that they can influence something. Even for Mrs. Merkel, it's absolutely necessary to create that more integrated federal Europe. Otherwise, she shall not have this huge internal market that is so important for the German economy. And my fear a little bit is in the beginning of this year that after the OMT operation of Mr. Draghi, pressure has gone down, not only in the financial markets, but pressure has gone down also on the political leaders in Europe to make this huge jump forward to a more integrated Europe.
Now, there's one country you know particularly well in Europe. It's Italy. You like Italy very much. There will be elections in Italy on the 24th of February. And one of the main concerns, of course, of voters is unemployment, rising unemployment. We're going to talk about this in a moment, but first let's watch our report.
Many of these hundreds of thousands of young Italian teachers are likely to be disappointed. They've all come to apply for only 11,000 jobs in nurseries across Rome.
I don't have any trust in my country. There's no way out. You're condemned if you leave or if you stay. There's no alternative. If you want to do something on your own, you're not given the chance. It's a country for old people.
37% of young people up to the age of 24 are unemployed in Italy. Unemployment overall stayed stable at over 11% in November, but it's still the highest rate the country's known for 21 years. Worse, according to some analysts, unemployment's expected to reach a peak of 11.6 this summer.
Italians have understood that the crisis is not a short-term issue. Therefore, there is no reason for waiting for a better scenario in a few weeks or in a few months. I think that this explains why some people are now looking more actively at the job.
The Italian economy has been suffering under increased austerity measures following the euro debt crisis and has been in decline since summer 2011. In the last half of 2012, growth fell by almost 4%. Reviving the labour market will be a tough challenge for Prime Minister Mario Monti's successor. Italian elections are due to be held on the 24th and 25th of February.
Guy Verhofstadt, Italy is still in recession. Yep. Unemployment has been rising. It's the highest rate in 2 decades. Does Mario Monti really deserve all the praise that we've heard here?
This is the result not of the policies of Mario Monti. This is the result of the lack of policies of his predecessor, of Mr. Berlusconi, who was in charge for nearly, I should say, 1 decade, and who did nothing at all. The only decisions he has taken were decisions to put legislation in the parliament to protect his own private interests, but not the interest of the Italian citizens. So what Monti has done was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, it was a disaster in Italy. You know, a few months ago, these rising interest rates, Italian interest rates, were in fact ruining the country. So what Monti did was absolutely necessary. That said, I think there is an enormous responsibility of Europe in that, because we are asking, and that's good, for austerity, lowering the fiscal deficit, lowering the public debt. At the same time, what we don't do with Europe is to launch a number of investment programs in those countries who are affected. Countries like Italy, like Spain, like Greece.
Why aren't we launching these programs?
So, well, there is still a fear to launch what I call project bonds. That is a type.
Germany doesn't want to hear of it.
Well, there was now a breakthrough a little bit, but for an amount of a few millions of euro. A few millions of euro shall not make the difference inside the European Union. So what is necessary is that on the European level, where there is no deficit, where there is no public debt, we launch a number of huge transnational initiatives, public works, new networks for energy, for internet, and that can create new jobs in those countries like Spain and Italy who are very much affected by the crisis.
You mentioned Berlusconi. You know him because as a former
Belgian
Prime Minister,
a few years, yeah.
You sat with him in the council. Can he win this election?
I hope not. I'm not very in favor of Mr. Berlusconi, because I think he is responsible for the mess in Italy of today, and it's crazy even to think that he could return in this election. So I hope that Mr. Monti, but there are others like Mr. Bersani, can win these elections. But it's not to me; it's to the Italians to decide on that. But I hope that they shall understand that most of their problems of today are in fact based on the errors of the predecessor of Mr. Monti.
Now, talking about the EU budget, at the end of last year, EU leaders agreed to disagree. They couldn't agree on a budget for the next 7 years. They will have to meet again in 1 month. Are you hopeful that this time there will be a deal on the table?
I think it's possible. Maybe not in February, because there are Italian elections after that. So it's in my opinion, even impossible to reach a deal when there are elections in Italy a few weeks later. But I hope that a deal is possible inside the Council. But that doesn't mean that a deal is done inside the European Union, because also the European Parliament
will have to
approve it. And there are big problems in this. We don't discuss the fact that we lower this global figure of 975 billion euro for the next period of 7 years. Our problem is that we want to have expenditures. We want to make expenditures for investments in the future. We want not to make cuts in, for example, European expenditures for innovation, for research. That has to be kept in this budget. Secondly, we think that it's absolutely necessary to foresee own resources. That means a direct funding from the citizens of the European Union, and not to use every time what we have now today, national contributions. This is a bad thing. You need a direct link between the citizens, between the taxpayers and the European Union.
I'd like to talk about your home country, Belgium, because it's a good example of the rise of separatism across Europe. The NVA, which clearly lobbies for the independence of Flanders, has become the largest party in Flanders. How worried are you regarding the survival of the Belgian state?
Now, I'm very sure that the majority of the people living in Flanders are in favor of the unity of the country. And they don't want to create an independent, autonomous Flemish nation. There is a big difference, for example, between Catalonia and Flanders. The Catalans are a minority in Spain. Well, the Flemish people are a majority in Belgium. So, but I'm very confident that in any way a majority of the Flemish people are against just dreams.
But then how do you explain that more than 30% of Flemish people do vote for the NVA?
First of all, 30% is not majority, and secondly...
But it keeps on rising.
It's naturally a crisis. We are in a deep crisis in Europe, and automatically that means that nationalist and populist party gain some votes. You see it in Finland, you see it in Sweden, we have seen it in the past in the Netherlands, Le Pen in France. It's always like that. That is that the public opinion is going in a direction of more nationalism and more populism at the moment when it is difficult, economically difficult. And we as pro-Europeans have to explain that it is not by going back behind your national borders that you can solve the problems in the modern world. It's by creating a more integrated Europe and not with nationalism or populism.
But Belgium will survive this?
Definitely, yeah.
Now, to finish the program, this show is co-produced with the Robert Schuman Foundation, a leading think tank on European affairs. Its Director General, Pascale Joannin, had a question for you. Let's listen to her.
Mr. President, we just start a new year and there is a lot of challenge ahead. We need to find a way out to the European crisis. We need to adopt a European budget, and we need to fight also against separatisms and nationalisms inside the European Union. What are your priorities as President of the Liberal Group of the European Parliament this year? What do you want to achieve in 2013?
So what is your big priority for this year?
I think there is only one priority for this year, and that's to end the euro crisis, and certainly to end the fallout of the euro crisis, the enormous unemployment, huge unemployment, for example, under young people. And to do so, there is only one thing to do, that is to go the fastest as possible in the direction of a full-fledged fiscal, economic and political union. That's the only way to end this crisis and to gain again confidence and growth.
Guy Verhofstadt, leader of the Liberals and Democrats in the European Parliament, thank you very much for talking to us. And thank you for watching this edition of Talking Europe from the European Parliament in Brussels. It's time to go back to Paris for more news.